Okay. 11 Days of Remembrance, Day 2. Chapter 2. Growing Up on the Farm. Clarence B. Sutherland Larry was born on June 26, 1922, on a farm east of Truro, Nova Scotia, a little community called East Meldrum. Truro, known as the hub of Nova Scotia, is settled in the center of the province, 60 kilometers east of Halifax. On their 120-acre farm, the Sutherlands grew vegetables, raised 12 milking cattle, 2 horses, and a Shetland pony, along with an assortment of other critters. Larry's mother, Margaret MacDonald, married his father, James Sutherland, in 1904. And together they had 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. Larry, like any child of that era, learned the ways of hard work and farming at a very young age. Before leaving for school each morning, he put in 2 to 3 hours tending livestock, or in the early spring planting crops. The rest of the chores were done after school and sometimes took until dark to complete. The family's 4-bedroom farmhouse was built like a fort. It had 12 by 12 beams and is still standing today. In the 1920s, times were tough. Few had money to waste. Just putting a decent meal on the table was a major accomplishment. Living on the farm meant there was always good food to eat, and the variety was not the greatest. Money was in short supply, and there was none for such luxuries as shoes or boots. The family sold most of the milk they produced, but the highest price at the time was $1 per weight. To put this perspective, and 100 weight today costs $72. And in the fall, the children walked barefoot 2 miles to the one-room schoolhouse in the valley. After the first snow fell, Larry's dad, a master of all trades, made them leggings. Leggings were made from tanned cowhide, formed and stretched into shape of a boot. For extra warmth, when Larry was checking the trap line and hunting, his father made him moose snacks by carefully removing the skin on the leg of the moose, which was tanned. The moose sack was then laced over the legging. This fall hunt was important for the family. In the fall of 1940, James Sutherland embarked on his hunting trip to a camp 15 miles from the farm. The fall hunt put meat on the table for the winter, and it didn't have a whole lot to do with sport. His lifelong friend, Larry Burnett, was going to accompany him. Larry is known to his friends as Lure, was a man not overly furnished with loads of ambition. Larry's most redeeming quality was his ability to shoot. Larry would say in later years that there were times when he wished Larry was in the rear turn of the Lancaster instead of him. So, Larry's hunting skills at the time had a company for 22 moose and 82 deer. James Sutherland arrived early to clean up the camp for everyone's arrival and cut some wood. Having finished his chores and knowing Lure would not show up until well after all the work was done, far from afternoon shooting trap. He had his trusty old First World War 303 Mark III Lee Enfield rifle with him. Some distance from the camp, Larry's dad spotted a moose. He took him and fired, but lost sight of the game. It was clearly a miss. However, seconds later he had sight of a moose again and fired for a second time, only to lose sight of the animal once more. Finally, James Sutherland sighted the moose for the third time. This time when he fired, the moose went down. Questioning the gun and his ability to shoot at this point, James walked 100 yards between himself and the downed animal and sight the kill in front of Larry. 3 dead moose. Larry's brother John always took a team of horses to the camp. The moose were so painful that there was never a time when at least one was not taken. When John arrived with the team of horses, he was taken back with the daunting task of pulling 3 out of the brush. It was really hard going. One of the horses went down in a bog, and John had to use the other horse with aid of back and tray to pull the horse out. John had not returned with the moose, with Lord Furley standing with his arms crossed, surveying the camp. Lord asked his friend, "I wonder if we have any luck tomorrow." James responded, "I think it's looking after Lord." James was a man of steel. Forging by hard labor, he worked non-stop to support his wife and 8 children. The farm simply couldn't supply enough income to supplement it. He worked on road projects and construction all over the province. He even worked the log drives on the Litscombe River that flows through Garsborough County and empties into the Atlantic Ocean. This would afforded Larry the opportunity to take part in school activities. The only leisure time Larry had as a boy was devoted to softball, and other to be able to do this, he had to trade off work shifts on the farm with his brothers. School was a nice break from the farm, and Larry was fortunate to have Eleanor Johnson, who had recently graduated from the Normal College in Truro, as the teacher. The young teacher handled grades 1 to 8. The one-room valley school, and the system seemed to work better than one might expect it, because all the young children were totally memorized by all the fascinating things the older kids were learning. Spring meant the beginning of the baseball season, and Larry was usually selected to pitch. In order to hone his skills, Larry would spend endless hours throwing rocks over the roof of their barn. Everyone on Larry's team had a great relationship with their coach, Jack Seaman, and as a result, they won most of their games. Sadly, Jack was the victim of fateful lightning strike. During one summer evening, Jack was such a driving force for the team that his death flattened the young boys' desire to participate in the team. Finished out the season. It was their final one before the team was dismantled. The little school in the valley housed about 40 students in total. This one-room school had become home to him. It was a real challenge for Larry to leave that place of security in order to continue his education at the local high school located 5 miles from the farm. The whole family made the decision to buy Larry a new bike at the cost of $36 to expect his long trek back and forth of the leather. It was bad enough that Larry could not bike to school. He would stick his thumb out and hitchhike or simply not attend. With schoolwork, farm chores, and sports, Larry didn't have much time to get in trouble. His brother Howard was another story. The older children had access to the 1925 Model T, but there was no money to purchase the petrol required to run it. Without petrol, the car wasn't much good to them, so when Harold came up with a scheme to get the petrol they needed, he also got Larry to partake in his venture. Near the church in the valley was a lover's lane. The road was mostly hidden by stubby spruce trees in a row that had a corridor, which made it a fine place for couples to park at night. To start down, Larry and his brother Harold picked a particularly dark night with no moon at all. They made their stealthy approach to target vehicle and waited for the springs to start bouncing when you covered the sound of the step horn being inserted into the petrol tank of the unsuspecting vehicle. Larry leaned against the bumper of the car, and it happened to read the license plate. To his horror, he realized they were about to knock over his brother John's car. John had spent his last dollar to purchase the car he needed to get back and forth to work. Looking at Harold, Larry vehemently said, "To hell with this." The two brothers took off down Lover's Lane without so much a drop of fuel in their petrol can. That was Larry's first and last criminal enterprise. Larry faced many challenges at high school. Getting there was a challenge on its own, but trying to find clothes that allowed him to fit in with the other students was the worst. Most of the kids in his class were raised in town, totally alien to the farm environment Larry was used to. Unable to relate to a lot of them, Larry often felt left out, even lonely at times. It was not long before Larry dropped out of school. His father had very little formal education, and while his mother was once a school teacher, the life of a farm wife had taken its toll on her, and she was too weak to oppose Larry's decision. Margaret had given birth to 8 children, 2 of them stillborn, and the demanding life of poverty slowly ate away at her until one day she locked herself in her room, refusing to eat or to talk to anyone. Her body readily formed the life she had led. Her spirit yearned to be with the children. She had lost it. Was not long before she passed away silently in her bed. Her remaining children took up the enormous task of fighting their own battles for survival in a difficult time. Larry's brother John worked at the Eastern Hat Factory in Truro, Nova Scotia prior to joining the Army in the spring of 1941. He got a job for Larry in the plant. John was stationed at the large Debert Air Base just outside of Truro. His job as a sergeant was to teach a scout sniper course over the curtain of freedom, come at a high cost. Larry, on the other hand, was at point his life. Didn't want to go. Distant Fine Cross and Bar DFC and Bar before John was posted overseas. That is the end. I'll do chapter 3 and 4 tomorrow. If you see a veteran, thank them, and I thank the veterans who fought World War I and World War II so I could be free and I could read these books and I could make my videos. Thank you.